said the Prague 4? Prague 4? Where is the address? Where are you taking me here? Some people who are where for him. What is this?
Please do. Please list.
Schamáš ho nedal, tady skáčel po tomto. A běž si do auta.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. I'm Antonio from Colectivule. Today I want to interview a member from the local community who has been recently arrested by the police and who has been silenced because of their activism for Palestine and maybe also for other activism since these countries have been engaged in arresting activists as part of a wider attempt to silence communities and also to silence our solidarity towards Palestinians. I want to thank you very much for being here today and for taking this offer to interview you. I would like to ask first of all, how are you doing today? Like just to a little bit break the ice, like to feel relaxed because this is a very serious situation. And also, I would like you to explain a little bit who are you, also like a little bit to get to know you better, and from there we can start getting a little bit more into the topic. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and for being here as well and capturing this the words that I want to share with you and with all the community. So I am well. I hope you are as well. I am Jesus, and Jesus is a person who was born in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico, and is a student. Jesus is also an academic. Jesus is a journalist who has been living in the Czech Republic for at least 2 years, and who moved here to continue my studies, to continue with the things that I was doing before, which is journalism, which is intellectual activity or philosophy, to be more specific.
Well, first to ask the first question is the question we always ask to the expats, or let's call it immigrants here. Every time you meet someone, you ask, why did you choose the Czech Republic to study? Actually, from all the countries like where you could have studied, why here?
So I chose the Czech Republic as a kind of accident, in a sense. It was one of the options that I had to study abroad. That was about 8 years ago. I came here for a semester. I fell in love with the country, with the people here, and I found community that I continue to build upon and to be part of. So I've been since in Prague, in and out, and for 2 years now since I started my PhD here, I moved here and I chose this as my home, where I've been building a community where I met some of the closest people to my heart, and that is mainly the reason why I decided to stay in the Czech Republic.
And how has this community somehow helped you, like in your let's say interests, or how this community has affected maybe your like life stance, or how does it affect, for example, your activism?
So the community here, first of all, it's been probably the strongest support that I've received from anyone else. If it wasn't because of this community, I don't know where I would be, and I mean, like, I wouldn't know whether I would still be in jail. I don't know if like I would have been able to come off as strong as I am doing right now, if I would have the courage to speak to you all today. And it is thanks to this community that I continue to struggle. And this community, it's not just a community that came together because of Palestine, but it is a cause that most of the people that are close to me and that I can say that are part of this community do believe in the struggle of the Palestinian people, because of a deep concern or deep believe in justice and humanity.
I think an interesting question to ask, apart from your formal activities, let's call it, is also the fact that you are an activist. And I have the question of how, well, a little bit an introduction to the question is, usually we see a lot of lack of empathy or lack of interest in the problems of the world. Like people go over their lives pretending that nothing is happening, for example, in Palestine, and not only in Palestine, but also in other latitudes. So how is the process, or how was the process, personal process, for you to get interested in activism? How did you become an activist?
So the story, I think it goes back many years at this point, or many years by my standard. I was raised to believe in justice, to believe in equality. My parents brought me up or raised me to believe in these, or to have these very strong values. And it was ever since that I started to see injustice as something negative, as something that I couldn't stand for, and something I had to struggle against. But it was really until when I started engaging in actual political action, or in active political action, was during in the aftermath of the assassination or disappearance and then assassination of 43 students in Mexico.
Yes.
That was over 15 years ago at this point, or over 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah, it's 2014, right?
2014, yeah. And after that, coming from Ciudad Juarez, a city that is infamous for femicides and for gender-based violence, I engaged, or I grew up, or I educated myself and as an active political agent within the feminist movement, the local feminist movement, and in connection with that, with queer activism as well. I then moved on to other areas of activism, if you want to call it like that, which is the migrant movement, or the migrant solidarity movement, being a city that is in the border with the US, having myself studied in the other side of the border. It made me realize what the struggles of immigrants, specifically in that region, is. And then once I moved away, and having experienced other things, such as mass shooting where Mexicans were targeted in the same city where I studied, and then seeing how these struggles, or these injustices and these systems of oppression kept repeating themselves and somehow kept going to the same source, which is white supremacy, colonialism, patriarchy, and so on, I started to discover how all these things were interrelated, how they all form part of oppressive systems that support each other. And this is how I ended up in the question of Palestine, which I think is central to all of these struggles, because it's somewhere that all of these come together. Yes.
And regarding the communities, because then I guess that the people around you also model or mold a little bit your, let's call it like your stance or your opinions. Have you found like a similarity between the community which formed you politically in Mexico and also the community where you interact here in Prague?
Yes. So the reason that I wouldn't want to talk about these communities as being separate, in a sense, and that's comes part with this, like the interrelatedness of these struggles, but also the interconnectedness of people who struggle against it and people who belong to solidarity movements and resistance movements, is that whereas while there is significant differences and significant particularities to each struggle, and I wouldn't say that every struggle connects to each other in a direct way, they all kind of have a sustainable value system that keeps repeating itself, or that I've encountered in Juarez, that I've encountered in El Paso, that I encountered in Vienna, where I was established before, and that I encountered here, and that I encountered within the broader global solidarity movement for Palestine. That is just this deep sense of or deep craving or yearning for justice, for humanity, a deep care for humanity. That is kind of what keeps us going, and what I think should ground every one of our struggles.
Did you see like any similarity, for example, in the state response in your opinion, and also within your activist experience, between, for example, the reply from the Mexican state and the Czech state? Will you consider them like also because that obviously our struggles are interconnected, but is also like the state answer analogous?
So I wouldn't want to equate the two because again they are very different circumstances, they are very different histories, and they are very different political systems in a sense. What I can say that I can see replicated is the easiness of using the state apparatus to target dissent, the way in which police is used to target activists or people that are engaged in any sort of challenge to the system. It is just the ability of the state to just basically give an order and arrest people who have not committed a crime and who their only kind of the only thing they did was really oppose or have a different opinion from that is established, and pose in that sense pose a threat to the state. So I would say it's just that willingness to use the state apparatus to target people who just dare to think differently.
Let's speak about the particularities of the modus operandi of the state apparatus in your case. What have you been arrested, or what have you been charged for? I don't know exactly if the word charged is the correct word. And what are the charges against you?
So I was detained after 12 police officers entered into our community space, and they took me into the police station. After having asked me or requested me whether I had any weapons, knowingly, I think that as they would have done, that the only weapons that were in that space were the ones that they brought in.
In which space?
That was the space that I collectively ran with my colleagues. And so after that, I was told that I was being arrested, or I was under arrest for the charge of support and promotion of terrorism, a charge that to this day I dispute, and to which I would not accept in any sort of in any case.
And was there any specific reason why you were charged with supporting terrorism, right?
So the argument that the Czech police, and especially the prosecutors of the anti-terrorism unit of the Czech police, their argument is that I supported a particular action by Leila Khalid, who is a member of the Palestinian resistance since over 40 years or 50 years at this point, or even longer than that, and who engaged in a lot of different types of actions, one of which is being used in this case against me for the fact that I held a portrait of her. This portrait was not even a portrait, it was a picture that was used for a coloring book, and for basically just carrying it in a registered protest that was allowed and was carried on with the permission of that same police.
So basically the police is having an argument, or like, let's call it not the police, because the police is like let's call it the hands of the brain, right? At the end, the brain is like the wider state apparatus. They obviously have a definition, like to make such a charge against you means that they have a definition of terrorism, which they will like support. But in your opinion, what is terrorism, or why has been like, is one of these words that everybody uses like as just calling like very broad things? I feel like it's getting devoid of like meaning and like substance. In your opinion, what is terrorism?
So I think we need to recognize that terrorism can mean at least two things. And we need to make sure to disambiguate these two definitions, or these two understandings of terrorism. On the one hand, we have a legal definition, which I think it's by all means a reasonable definition. And it is the use of terror or violence to further a political aim. And this terror or violence primarily directed at innocent civilians. Something that I think most people would condemn in most circumstances, or in if not in all circumstances, including myself. The problem is that the use of terrorism does not, especially in legal codes, does not take this definition, but rather takes a political definition, which says, or which rather falls more in line with whatever serves, or what terrorism is for especially countries that embrace this imperialistic framework, or this or this colonialist framework, is whatever opposes the interest of the empire, whatever opposes the interest of the ruling class. And basically anyone who engages in any kind of resistance, legitimate or illegitimate, is labeled a terrorist just because they are a threat to those same forces. And so that the problem here is that when you dissolve those two definitions into one, and it enters into legal codes, it can be used to persecute people who the only thing they are doing is basically either engaging in legitimate resistance, which is protected by the law and by international law, and people who support those actions.
In this case, for example, because obviously there are different peoples and there have been different resistance movements, right? Worldwide, we have seen obviously like the Palestinian cause is very bright, but it's not the only one. You as a Mexican also, because, and it comes maybe to a question I asked before, because you come from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
You are not Muslim. You have a Mexican. Well, you are from Mexico. Why do you solidarize, or is there any parallel between any resistance movement you see in Mexico and that you support, and which relationship you see with the Palestinian movement, or with the Palestinian liberation attempts, like if I will call it like by a name?
Mm-hmm.
And also like, is this like solidarity enough to like risk your social standing locally?
So that question, I think it has a lot of questions in between, and I think
so let's go by parts. Sorry.
So the first question, why as a Mexican do I support Palestine? And especially like not being Muslim. I think even that question by itself, it has a lot of different parts. So I would go just one by one. So I wouldn't take this as I as a Mexican support Palestinian liberation, but rather I would take it, I as a person who cares for justice stands for a people on their oppression, on their occupation, that is facing apartheid, that is facing today genocide. So I am not as a Mexican supporting Palestine, but I am as a person who cares for the value of humanity, for the value of life, stand against genocide. And that is why I stand with the Palestinian people, because I condemn to the highest degree any sort of illegal occupation, any sort of apartheid, and any sort of discrimination against a people, especially when these people have been expelled from their own lands to serve the interests of the empire. The second question, as a non-Muslim, I think it's interesting question. It's also a question that I think is difficult to answer for me, because I myself, I've developed an interest in Islam that arose in part out of the understanding of the Palestinian people. But also, I think there's a hidden part to this question is Palestinians are not all Muslims. And
that's true.
I don't. That's where like I found the question a bit funny, because it's most of the people that, or I wouldn't say most of the people, but the higher percentage of people who have been expelled from Palestine, it's from the Christian community. It's one of the most persecuted communities within Palestine, in terms of their own demographics. And so that's another question: why is the Christian community not solidarizing themselves with Palestinians, given that being the center of their religion is the same question? But it's the same question that you could ask for most Muslims as well. Why are they not solidarizing themselves with Palestine to the degree that they would do something about it? So yes, that would be my question, my answer for that.
And regarding just to just to wrap up the question, because sometimes, and I will say it, I will also open a little bit personally here, but sometimes I see that a lot of people who solidarize with the movement are, as you said, minorities, that they are risking a lot by doing this. And people who are a little bit more, they have, for example, either stronger passports or they have stronger social standing. They are not really like appearing anywhere. Like you don't see them protesting. Like so. How do you see, or how did you have like the resolution to actually go protesting? Like why, despite like all the risks that you will encounter after your arrest?
So the question of why do I think that oppressed people side with oppressed people, and why do the oppressors or the ones to benefit from this don't? I think it's a very easy question to answer. Is oppressed people solidarize themselves with oppressed peoples because they know what oppression feels like, and they understand and they see themselves in it. In other groups, whether they are directly related or not, they see themselves in it. Those who are privileged, those who either whether they have something to lose or not, they decide, or they willfully or unknowingly, they solidarize themselves with the oppressors because they see themselves in the oppressors, or they see their own privilege at risk. Once one system of oppression falls, the next system of oppression will fall, and then the next one, and then the next one. And so there is a risk for them, of course, of losing that privilege, and they have no reason, they have no interest in those struggles, because why would they risk losing that privilege?
And do you feel that you lost like a privilege which was not worth losing?
No. So why do I risk, for example, my immigration status here? Because in the midst of genocide, what is a residence permit? What is an immigration status? What is my job? What is my livelihood worth? When a people is being persecuted and being starved to death, when they are being bombed, when they are being raped, where their houses are being demolished, where all their belongings are being destroyed, where every single part of their livelihoods, where all their families are disappeared. When this is happening in broad daylight, it is being transmitted live in social media. It is shown all over the world. What is worth anything else once this is happening? So I think if I risked my immigration status, I risked all this, I did it knowingly, and I did it because I believe that genocide is wrong, and that whatever I risk is nothing compared to the suffering that Palestinians are going through.
How do you feel also, because you are part of a community which has shared values, and you have now spoken a little bit of how, like your train of thoughts, let's call it, like how did you decide to take the actions you took and such, and how do you think, maybe not knowing, that it has affected the broader community? Do you think like somehow they have been like scared, or that they are a little bit more reluctant to speak up, or like did something changed after these events or after this arrest?
I think there is more wariness, and I think people have not only the right, but also the reason to be scared. I think it is reasonable, and I think people are allowed to be scared. And I think it's completely natural, and I think it is reasonable for people to be scared. But I don't want my story, or whatever story of all the peoples that have been persecuted because of their activism, because of their participation in solidarity with the Palestinians, that the lesson that we get from that is what the police wants us to feel, that is fear. I think what we need to get out of this, it's also not just this blind confidence that it doesn't matter what we do, but what we should learn from this is that we need to be more careful. We need to establish more secure networks. We need to engage in security culture, and we need to be aware that we are facing a risk, and being aware of the risks, and being aware that we are going to face opposition. We are struggling against a global system of oppression that is maintained by global capital, that supports global capital, and that it is being supported by the most, probably some of the most powerful people in the world. So of course there are many risks.
Do you feel like I don't know how to say this in English actually? I like in Spanish I would say chivo expiatorio, like a scapegoat, uh, because you were as you were telling me that you were basically taken from the community center, and it was, I think, very dramatic. It was like something with force, I will guess. So there was like a lot of like show of force. So do you think this was, as you say, like a silencing attempt, or like a attempt to scare the broader community?
I think it was an attempt at making an example of me, to definitely trying to scare everyone. To with the kind of risk of sounding very conspiracy theory like, it is very strange the fact that they went on the weekend on a Saturday to arrest me, to enter a space where people could see me, at the same time or right after a protest for Palestinians was going on, and with 12 armed police, masked police, in the way that they did to arrest me, a person who, like, I don't know what threat I can pose, but I definitely don't think I can be the reason that the Czech police decided to spend that much money and that much resources to stop someone who didn't have any weapons, didn't have any, I don't know what they thought or what they believed I could do. But any threat that they thought I could pose, I think they overestimated by a lot. So I think this, more than anything, it was a theater performance, and it was an attempt to show or to send a message to the community.
Like a choreography, right? Like let's call it like a little bit like a play, or like a theater play. Also, I guess like a state wants to show the force, right, to dissuade any potential like future action. How are you feeling? I don't want you to remember like any stressful, let's call it, stressful events. So I want to know if you're feeling well, like if we can continue with the questions, or like if it's not getting very stressful.
No. It's all good. I can continue with it. The one thing that I do want to just reiterate is that, yes, the police orchestrated this whole attempt at scaring us. It is important that I do not succeed, because just as they did it with me, they may try in the future to do it with other people. And it is very important that we remain wary, and that we remain aware of this possibility, and that we respond in a wise and responsible way.
I have a question regarding the. I mentioned before that there was like a lack of empathy, or like a lack of. Just you mentioned also like oppressed people side with the oppressed people, and they solidarize with the oppressed people, right? So obviously, if you're not oppressed, you will hardly find like any reason why you will go to the demonstration or engage in another solidarity action. Why do you think the authorities are actually trying to intimidate you if the Palestinian cause here in the Czech Republic is not a majority issue in Czech society? Why would you be a problem if you are like, why a minority person will be a problem?
I am, first of all, why me? Because I think for two reasons. Because I was an easy target in many ways. I think they thought it was going to be easy for me to get scared because of my migrant status, because of my background, because I am subjected to more restrictions than other people, because I could be persecuted more easily without the media paying as much attention. So I think they thought I could be an easy target, and that would be a way to infiltrate the Palestinian movement, solidarity movement here. But on the other hand, I think I am a threat, and I don't want to sound like I don't want to overstate my importance, but I am a threat to this Czech government and this system because not only because I decide to show myself at demonstrations, not only because I decide to speak up for Palestinians, but I think my place as an academic, as a person, as a journalist, as someone who seeks the truth and who goes after the truth and tries to share the truth with other people, I am a threat in the sense that the Czech Republic for the longest time has rejected or avoided the need to recognize the truth of the Palestinian people, which is they have been persecuted, they have been expelled from their land, they have been ethnically cleansed from the land, they have been genocided up to this point, and the longer than the Czech society can turn their eyes away from that, the longer that the ruling class here in the Czech Republic can continue supporting and enabling this system to continue. So for the little or big that I can do, I can at least follow the testimony of Palestinians. I can at least share the knowledge of what is happening in Palestine. And I have, for better or worse, some kind of platform or some kind of channel through which I can share this story, which would prevent the Czech government from continuing to hide this from its people.
Would you say that these events or this action by the Czech state is, let's call it, a microcosm of something bigger? Like, do you think, like, in general terms or in a bigger universe, the freedom of expression is being threatened?
It is, for sure. And not only the freedom of expression, but the whole system of rules-based order, international order, the whole narrative of the West as being this democratic space, and the whole myth of Zionism being a progressive force or a progressive political movement which sides with an imaginary Western civilization. All of this is taking its mask off and revealing itself as what it is, which is pure and old colonialism, pure and old imperialism that is used to oppress people around the world, that is being used to steal the land from indigenous peoples all around the world, including in my own country, including across the African continent, the South American continent, across Asia, in the Pacific Islands, all over the world. And Palestine is just the latest iteration of this same process of colonization.
Yeah, I mean, this brings us like to a very difficult big picture, let's call it. It's like a little bit like the David fighting the Goliath, if I can make like an analogy, because it feels like, I mean, we are like a lot, but not very powerful, right? What I want to say is that we are like little ants fighting like a bigger system. And now your case is, I don't know if it's the first one, but it sets a precedent on the persecution of solidarity and also on the right of the right to expression in the Czech Republic. What would you say that will be the next steps to take under this circumstance? What changed, and how will you address this new paradigm, let's call it?
Mm-hmm. So I like the ant analogy because it reminds me of a movie, A Bug's Life, where it is like, yeah, one ant by by themselves cannot do anything, but when a lot of ants come together, they can do a lot of things. And we first need to be aware that we are not alone. The Czech or the Palestinian solidarity movement in the Czech Republic is not alone. Solidarity movements exist all around the world, and they include students, journalists, academics, people who are neither engaged in any of these activities but just have a sense of humanity and of justice. It includes a lot of people around the world. And so we are not alone. That's the first thing that I think we need to recognize, that for whatever we happen to go through, other people have gone through it, and there are lessons to be learned from it. Another very important one is we need to take our blinds away, and recognize that the Czech government is not exceptional in not going to use the police or the state force against us. As the German government, as the US government, as the UK government, as many other governments around the world, they are doing exactly the same thing. They're using the state apparatus to persecute dissent. So we need to be not be naive about that anymore. I think it was, in a sense, I don't want to say positive, but awakening moment for the movement that they did that to me, because we recognize that the police is not on our side. They might be friendly at times, but they are not on our side, and they will never be on our side. And all they want to do is going to be the same things. It's going to be squashing dissent, and it's going to be prevent the truth from coming out. So we need to recognize that, and we need to be more aware about the strategy and strategize accordingly. We need to develop a security culture, and we need to continue moving, because Palestine and Palestinians are going through a famine right now, are going through genocide, and it hasn't stopped. And not because it's out of the news, and not because we hear less about it means that things are better in any way. Things are worse, and that means we need to move faster, and we need to move stronger.
And what changed, or this is like community-wise, but personally to you, what will you say are your next steps? If you feel like if they successfully scared you, or do you still feel confident? What, as a person, as an individual, as the little ant, let's call it, what will you do now? Or what do you think of doing?
So right now I need to wait for my case to continue to be settled. I need for the charges to be dropped, because this is an illegal persecution. The charges are built on nothing but falsehood. So I need to wait for that to happen. I need for my legal case to proceed. I need for my migration case to proceed, and I need to get my life together, in a sense. The police still has my phone, so they confiscated my phone, and they haven't given me any date for the time that I will get it back. And I will continue to do the things that I have been doing, which is engage in whatever support I can give to Palestinians. Right now, because of obvious circumstances, I need to step back in some way or another. That doesn't mean that I am not supportive of the cause, and that doesn't mean that my commitment to the freedom of the Palestinian people has decreased in any way or form. I am as committed today as I was 1, 2, 3 months ago, if not more, because, as I said, the fate of Palestinians is more grim or in danger than ever.
So basically, let's call it, your stamina has not been damaged.
If anything, it has been made more real. It made me recognize, or it made me feel like I have a place in this movement, and it made me more connected to people who have been persecuted as I am today, and it will just make me and the movement stronger.
So now that you have this wisdom, let's call it, or this experience, and also not to overwhelm you too much with personal questions anymore, what would you tell the public if they are scared, if they are curious, or if they have a need to actually solidarize themselves publicly, but they have not really done it because they are actually scared of these actions from the states?
Mm-hmm.
What would you recommend, or what will be your final message?
So my final message, I think, and what I would recommend is learn about security culture, learn about what you need to do to protect yourself, become aware of what the risks are to engage in support of the Palestinians, but don't let that discourage you, because that is exactly what they want. And there are reasons to be scared, yes, there are reasons to be more careful, because if they started this already, I'm not going to lie to you and say this is not going to happen again. This is probably going to happen again, but we need to be more prepared. And if anything, this should bring more care into our security, and this should encourage us to continue. So don't stop, and free Palestine.
Free Palestine. Thank you very much for your interview and for the time you have spent here. Also, I want to thank you for basically for your activism, because I think it's important to convince everyone around us that it's important to get involved and actually to start making a change, because we need more ants in our fight. Thank you very much, and thank you very much everyone for listening to this interview. My name is Antonio from Colectivole. See you in another round of interviews.
Thank you.
Thank you.